Here we go.
Greetings. This is the regular meeting of the Planning Commission. I call the meeting to order. We'll call the roll. Luke?
Pearson.
Here.
Willenbring.
Here.
Campbell noted that he will be absent. Tayada also noted that he will be absent. McCauley.
Here.
Hagan noted that she will be absent tonight. And Wilson.
Here.
Thank you, Luke. Pledge of allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Approval of the agenda. For those who may have the old agenda, there was a modification to include elections of the chairperson and vice chairperson as item 4.
Move to approve.
Okay. Second?
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Then I guess we move directly to the nominations and elections of chairperson and vice chair. Anyone have nominations?
I make a motion to nominate, to keep the board, the chair and a vice chair as they are right now with both Dallas and Tom.
Okay, we said
Second.
second. All those in favor? Well, wait a minute. No new nominations to be made, then nominations will be closed. And this motion requires a second also, a first and a second.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Election to be used by ballot, or we can just do it by acclamation if you wish.
Do it.
Acclamation.
Yeah.
Okay, all those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes, thank you. Approval of the minutes. Any more changes to the minutes by anybody?
No.
I always sick that one.
I personally saw none, but anyone's got any?
No.
Seeing none, I ask for a motion to approve the agenda, the minutes.
Motion to approve.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
Abstain.
Okay. Open forum. Now is a moment for people to come forward to speak if they wish, to say something that's not on the agenda already. Seeing as there's no one in the audience, I'll close the open forum. Open it first and close it, and move on to old business. Planning Commission 2025 work plan discussion.
Thank you, Chair. So just for the benefit of individuals who might be tuning in on the YouTube channel, there was a discussion with the City Council at the appreciation dinner, which was right before the cameras turned on here, just about the 2025 draft Planning Commission work plan. So the purpose of the work plan is to help provide some guidance to the Planning Commission as we progress throughout the year. It just gives some guidance in terms of what the responsibilities are for the Planning Commission. And I mentioned earlier that state statute really well defines the responsibilities of the Planning Commission. So that helps with this work plan. A couple things I just want to note is that we have an upcoming small area plan for the 12th and Geneva area, and then we anticipate that that there will be some early preparation work for the city's next comprehensive plan update, and staff will be engaging the Planning Commission for their feedback. Happy to answer any questions about the draft work plan.
Anyone have any questions? Luke?
And in terms of next steps, there's nothing formal that the Planning Commission has to do for the work plan. There will be a City Council action on the work plan at an upcoming meeting date there.
Okay. That moves us on to new business, zoning and subdivision code update, project discussion.
Yes, thank you. While I make my adjustments here on the screen, I have a presentation that I'll show in just a moment. So the city has been working with a consultant, HKGI, they're a planning consultant based here in the Twin Cities. We've been working with them since March of last year to update the city's zoning and subdivision code. Just for a little bit of history, the last time the code has been or had a comprehensive update, it's been over 15 years at this point, so it's well overdue for an overhaul. Recall that we've met with the Planning Commission a couple times over the past year regarding this project. The last meeting was back in November 7th, and we discussed several topics for the zoning code, including zoning districts, use and dimensional standards, development standards, parking regulations, landscaping, and exterior building materials and design. And then after the Planning Commission, we had a couple meetings with the City Council at workshops. So later in November 12th, we met with the council, and then last week, we met with the council again just to get their feedback on this project. So as we get closer to kind of wrapping up this project and actually getting into kind of the meat of it and having the Planning Commission and council review the draft ordinances, we wanted just to touch base with you, kind of check in and give you a status update of how this code project is going. And we also have just a few questions for you on some key topics. So recall that there was an online questionnaire a few months back that was intended to gather input from the public about this code update. It's always difficult when you have a questionnaire like that. We used a lot of visuals to help people kind of understand what we're trying to get at in terms of like new housing opportunities or new housing types that we might introduce in the city, for example. So just to recap, the survey was open to the public in late October through mid-November. We had 202 responses, which is decent. It's not statistically significant, but still useful in terms of seeing what the public feels or how they feel about the zoning regulations and subdivision standards. The general findings was that beyond single-family homes, there was some preference for different types of housing, such as two-unit dwellings, so think of like duplexes or detached, detached townhomes, and auxiliary dwelling units, or ADUs, and courtyard cottages. We don't have really a courtyard cottage development in Oakdale, but the idea there is smaller homes with a shared courtyard area. And there was some broad preference for increasing accessory building size, so we're talking about sheds and garages. Folks thought that there should be a little bit more wiggle room in terms of how big your sheds and garages should be. And there was also some mild preference or moderate preference for just allowing more flexibility in the development standards. So here with this graphic, it shows again that there's some modest preferences for the different types of housing beyond single family. So the least preferred housing type here in this questionnaire appears to be the small apartment buildings, but there was some preference for like two-unit dwellings in the courtyard cottages and like I said, the auxiliary dwelling units. Any questions about the questionnaire before I move on?
I do have a comment on this particular slide, actually. In a past life, I used to do a lot with statistics, and so the question I've got is, or statement I have is, I might be more interested in the actual distribution of the opinions than in an average, because you look at that list, it's statistically identical all the way down. It looks like it's statistically identical, so
Right.
I'm not sure that that tells me much.
Okay. No, that's a fair point. So. Other questions or comments before? Okay. Oh, one more slide here on the questionnaire results. I think that the key takeaway here from this set of results is that there's some preference for flexibility for, again, larger accessory structures, and preference for temporary signage to be kept on property a little bit longer than what our current regulations allow, which is essentially 20 days. There's a preference for reducing the number of required parking spaces and also slight preference to change the exterior design standards. Here's a look at the existing zoning map for the city, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, but just to give you some context of how, this is really to set up the next couple slides, but the general patterns in terms of zoning for the city, more intense uses tend to be concentrated along the major roads and streets in Oakdale, like the interstates, county highways, but also some of the busier city streets as well. You'll see the commercial, industrial uses near those streets, and that makes perfect sense for access purposes. And then residential, which is a little bit difficult to see there, the light red, the yellow, and the orange there, which is essentially scattered throughout the city. And then PUD, which can be either residential or commercial or even industrial. That's the dark green there. So here we have just a quick summary of the zoning districts and some changes that we're proposing as part of this project. So the existing R2 and R3 zoning districts would be consolidated into the proposed R2 district because through our analysis, we realized that there's really not that much difference between those districts and it's a bit redundant. We're also converting the existing R4 to the R3 as a result, and then the existing R5 would be converted to the proposed R4. And then the green text there on the right highlights the major changes for these districts. And feel free again to stop me, ask questions as we go along here. Another slide here for the summary of the residential districts. Notably, the proposed R3 zoning district would allow for smaller lots. So currently, the R3, or the equivalent district, allows lots to be 80-foot wide, and we're proposing to make them a little bit smaller to 50-foot wide. And also, the setbacks would be reduced as well. So a key topic from this code project is exterior building materials and designs, and I have several examples to follow this slide. So for commercial, industrial, public, institutional, and also some multifamily structures that are located within PUDs, they're subject to certain exterior design standards, and they have to consist of a certain percentage of exterior building materials. And the way that the city breaks it down right now is that there is 3 classes of materials. So as you can see in the table there, there's the class 1, class 2, and class 3. So I'll give you some examples of class 1 and 2 and 3. So class 1 includes materials such as brick, natural stone, and glass. Class 2 is architectural precast, EIFS, which is exterior insulation finishing system similar to stucco, and then specialty concrete blocks. And then finally you have class 3, which includes materials such as opaque panels, concrete blocks, glass blocks, and wood. So as you can see, office and commercial buildings have to consist of at least 70% class 1 material, and they have to be composed of at least 3 of those different materials, and then they can have up to 30% class 2 and class 3 materials. And then industrial warehouse, those types of uses require a minimum of 60% class 1 or 2 materials, and there has to be 2 different materials there. And then they can consist of a maximum of 40% class 3 materials. A few examples, like I mentioned. So here we have architectural metal wall panel systems, and this is considered a class 1 material under the code. Fiber cement wall panels, this is considered a class 2 material under the city's current code. Veneer masonry wall systems. Now, in these cases, they appear to be veneer brick. So in that case, they would be considered class 1 materials. And here we have examples of EIFS, and that is class 2 under our current code. And just a couple more examples, and these examples are actually from Oakdale. So you have the Norhart building just off Helmo and 94 there. And so the Norhart building is on the left. And on the right-hand side of the image, or the slide, is the proposed Enclave building. If you recall, that went through the Planning Commission a while back. And that has a mixture of different materials. So I do want to note that there was one recommendation from the City Council at the previous workshops that I mentioned. And that recommendation is that the city should maintain separate list of acceptable and prohibited exterior building materials. And so these lists would not be codified in the ordinance, but they would actually be kept separate. And they would be supplemental lists that the Planning Commission and City Council would review maybe every 2 or 3 years, and just to make sure that we're capturing materials or new materials as technology improves in the building materials world, and also new trends, preferences, if you will. More on that in just a moment. I do have some questions. So as you can see there on the screen, there's 2 questions here. We'll take them one at a time. So for non-public facing facades, are the required percentages in the table below there, are they acceptable or should they be adjusted? Or in other words, we've seen a handful of developments come through and they've sought deviations to reduce the amount of like class 1 materials on the rear of the buildings and also on the sides of the buildings. So is there an opinion from the Planning Commission about adjusting those required percentages?
In my opinion, is keep them the same, because you're basing it on what is only on the public side of the street. A good example is this one that was just passed probably last spring, if I remember right. And it's off of Helmo. It's a pound dog.
Yes.
I can't remember the name. Well, that particular one, they wanted to lower, the building itself was a whole different subject, but lower the sides, the requirements for the sides. But if you drive up and down Helmo, if you go going south, based upon where that building is and the separation between the 2 buildings of the animal hospital and that building was going to be, a large space is there. You're going to be able to see those fences, the dogs, everything. It's the same thing on the other side where that school is proposed. There's going to be a big space there. So you're going north on Helmo, you're going to see it. So reducing that requirement just based upon what is on street side, to me, is not what it should be looked at. It should be maybe more looked at every project separately based upon what it can be seen from the streets and going up and down the streets.
Based on what you said, the critical thing in what you said is the sides that are going to be visible the most.
Yes.
But the question was on rear side, which is going to be facing, on that particular case, was facing the rental area.
It is, but I will point out to you, if you drive east on 15th, because there's a large space there where the stone wall is, from the rental, you will see the back of that building very clearly.
One other thing, so you got to build in a little bit of wiggle room with those, because if you're talking just as a dog companion animal for
Yep.
reference, part of the thing was that they wanted to use kennel doors on that, and using the 70% materials wouldn't have allowed them to use that in a proper way. So sometimes I think we're looking at form over function.
That's what I'm saying. Every situation, if we maybe did take a look at separately and not have a blanket rule, but there are exceptions to each rule as it is.
So I think if you codify it, do like 70-30, with the backs, you could do less or up to discussion, so you don't lock the whole building in right away.
Other thoughts on that question? Well, if not, we can keep moving on here. So the second question there on the screen. So regarding the proposed supplemental list of acceptable and prohibited exterior building materials, does the commission have any suggestions for materials that should be on these lists?
Did we talk about in the November 7th one, like superior materials? Is that gonna be added to this or?
So, yeah, and maybe just a little bit of an explanation. In the current code, metals, superior metals are allowed. That's very difficult for us as staff to, pick and choose which metal is superior. And that's where this idea for acceptable materials list would come in handy. And I know, like, at the council workshop, one of the items that was suggested as being a prohibited material is corrugated metal. So I don't know if that quite answered your question, but.
Yeah, that's good with me.
Again, I can review the Class 1 and Class 2 materials if needed, and Class 3 as well, but maybe we could take the acceptable materials first. So the items like brick, natural stone, architectural precast, or cast stone, I think is the better term for it. Glass, copper panels, stainless steel. Do those still appear acceptable, or?
There's Class 1, yes.
For Class 2, we have specialty concrete block, burnished block, or rock face block. Architecturally textured precast concrete panels. Masonry stucco, that EFIS material. Any issues with those?
If you're talking, now are you talking, this is all just for visual in your materials as opposed to structural?
Yes.
Okay, because some of that precast concrete, it can look as good as some of the Class 1 material. So I think it depends on what they're using. I think there should maybe be considered as a cross between both of them.
I would imagine that that kind of material is going to become much more popular too as time goes on here. I know several years ago you wouldn't see it, but now it's almost indistinguishable from rock faces on houses.
And then Class 3, opaque panels, smooth scored concrete block, ceramic finish concrete block, glass block, and wood.
Fine.
I would think that you were talking about reviewing every 2 to 3 years. I think you should have a way to review it more often because materials science is a growing science too, and I think changes come a lot quicker than maybe every three years, so.
What about the prohibited materials? Are there strong opinions on types of materials that are substandard for, again, the commercial, multifamily, industrial buildings?
As was presented, corrugated metal is, while unattractive, if you're doing something like a car wash, pretty much mandatory. So I'm not sure how you draw those distinctions. Now granted, they'll probably do corrugated interior or waterproof interiors and brick outside, but I've seen corrugated ones around the cities too. Not that I want one next door to me, but
Any other types of materials that substandard?
It's, yeah, I can't think of anything off the top besides going plastic or whatever. I mean, there's numerous materials out there that we don't know about that could be used positively or negatively without knowing of it.
So maybe that's where the idea of,
Having a list
yeah,
is a good thing,
and updating it frequently.
yeah.
Okay, I just have one more. Well, actually, I guess it's two questions here, but so moving on to parking. We have the proposed parking table in the agenda packet that you have. And as we've gone through this code update project, that's one thing that we've heard, and I know the staff has identified that there's opportunity to adjust the parking requirements. But the question is, are there any specific uses throughout Oakdale that appear to have excessive amounts of parking spaces that are underutilized? And if so, what are they? We'd just like to get your opinion on that.
Let's say the parking lot over by Taco Bell, that half going to Helmo.
In front of Cub.
Yeah, Cub, not in front of Cub, but the other side, down by the axe throwing place. That's only,
Well, the old Rainbow.
The
parking
borough,
lot.
yeah.
yeah.
So that whole section there, you know, you've got Taco Bell, their parking lot's never full. The axe throwing place, I've never seen it full. It's like only, there might be 20% of that parking lot that's just wasted area there. And if you look through the rest of the parking lot too, it gets a little fuller, but I'm sure there's underutilized parking in that spot too, and that just comes right up to the top of my head.
I think that's more of a multi-use. You have Caribou right there that's parking in the area, and the borough, more entertainment. I've seen it full at nights, every single night, and they even have like pickleball clubs there. Dollar Tree, I think that's, I don't know, I'd respectfully disagree with you on that I don't think that parking lot is underused.
Just from what I've noticed when I'm
Yeah.
there. So we're there at different times of the day.
Yeah. I would say that there's, on the intersection of Stillwater Boulevard and Hadley, so going north, it's directly to the west of Canvas Health. There's just an empty parking lot that's,
that's part of Canvas Health's parking lot, actually.
it is.
Yeah. That was the
Their
overflow.
overthrow.
Overflow. I don't see that gets much use.
And I don't think I've ever seen Home Furniture's parking lot full.
Yeah. And then I just had one more point too, when I was looking at the map of Oakdale, is that I think north of Carlisle Fluid Tech, I think I saw their parking lot, maybe it's overflow as well, but I think I saw donuts tracks in their parking lot, their north lot. But those are the major two that I saw.
Fleet Farm's probably got a lot of excess parking too.
Yeah, I was thinking about that too. Yeah.
The question is, why is it based off of square footage of the building? Of most of some of these parking spots needed. Why not base it upon what will actually be there? You could have a 10,000 square foot building and not need that many parking spaces. The actual use of that building won't require that. So why not do it based upon required use? Or is that because that building's use could change and then you would have to put new parking in?
Yes, that's a big part of it, the change in uses. If you just have a shell of a commercial structure, I mean, that could be converted into a number of different uses. I mean, the other part is that it can be tricky if you use other other things to determine your parking, like number of employees, because that can change even over time with the same, if the same business is occupying a structure, their operations could dramatically change over the years. We do, in some cases, look to the occupancy load of the site, and that is a solid number. It's, based on building code, and we try to use that when it makes sense in the code. But yeah, for those uses like retail, the kind of the generic uses that captures a lot of different businesses, it just seems to work pretty well, just having a number of spaces based on square foot.
We did modify it on a number of occasions, and home furniture is one of the big ones, because it used to be a movie theater, and we basically allowed 3 other uses in that parking lot now, two other buildings. So it's been reduced quite a bit because of the type of business there.
You talked about, just business operations, even like I don't know, I go to work 3 days a week in the office, but I'm thinking of like, is it 4 Point Energy, north side of town, or it's over by Aldi?
Oh, Forefront.
Yes, yeah, or I'm not sure what their parking lot's like, but that's just a thought that I had, where eventually maybe employees, they all come back and they need that parking. I'm not on that side of town very often, but just a thought.
I don't know if half the parking lots, that used to be Imation 3M. And when it was bought by Forefront, they changed a lot of the parkings. They've sold off a lot of that land as well.
Oh, okay.
There's a lot of parking in the back of that place, too.
Yeah. I guess where most of the employees, or whatever's there now.
For me, whatever you can do to reduce the amount of parking space needed, I just don't see many places overflowing their parking. There's always seems to be more than enough parking, and so reducing would be nice for me. And sure, it would be a cost savings for the building as well.
One thing, is it state law for the amount of handicap spaces that are in parking areas?
Yes, the ADA parking spaces, that's a state law requirement. But when it comes to determining how many spaces, Fleet Farm or Taco Bell needs, that's completely up to the city.
Do you have a lot of people come and say, can we reduce it? Is there a request for that?
With some of the developments that we've seen, there's been some deviation requests to lower the parking requirements, and I'm thinking that that's mostly for the multifamily proposals that we've seen over the last couple of years. Any other uses that come to mind? And we're talking about having excessive parking spaces. Okay. And I guess just before concluding, does the Planning Commission have any other topics related to the code update that you would like the project team to explore and research a little bit more?
Next time you give us a grid, give us a legend,
That would be nice.
Oh,
so I
sure.
can figure out what the difference is between PS and P. I mean, I'm assuming P means permitted, but PS, I have no idea what a PS is.
Permitted with standards. So
Okay.
there's review standards.
Since we only see these once every 3 months, you forget
Right.
what we were told last time. So a legend would be nice.
The only other comment I've got, I'm sure you'll get it from the fire department, is on your first page of your report. It was a change in mixed-use district heights. That's going to impact their equipment. And I can't remember what the fire truck was that they just bought a few years ago, if that was 75 feet or 110 feet, I don't remember.
It's over 100 feet. The new fire truck it can extend over 100 feet.
Okay, that solves my Because I was remembering 75 feet, so.
When we met with the fire chief, that he was explaining that probably the more important thing is having a good setback from the building to actually extend, because, you know, sometimes you can't just make the ladder go straight up into the air. There has to be that angle there.
Anyone else have any questions for Luke?
No.
Then just the last thing here I'll show on the screen in a moment is the process, the kind of the last steps for this code update. So just as a reminder, we've been drafting the code section since June, and we're currently doing that right now, hoping to finish up in the next few weeks. And then we will have the city attorney's office review it. And then the planning commission and city council will then have the opportunity to review the draft ordinances. And that would occur in April is our anticipated timeframe. And then we would look at holding the required public hearing. And the adoption of the code is anticipated for May, but of course that's tentative. Things can change in that time. But that's all I have for the code update project. So, thank you.
Thank you, Luke. That brings us to the other category, a staff liaison update.
Yes. So I would expect a March Planning Commission meeting, because currently we have one conditional use permit application. That might be the only item for March. Besides that, happy to answer any other questions that you have.
Anyone have any questions for Luke on that?
No.
Okay. Commissioner update. Anybody
No.
on that? No. Okay, county liaison. Susan.
Back again, sorry. Have to fill Jake's shoes, big shoes to fill, but we'll see how I do. I'm happy to answer any questions if you guys have any right now.
Welcome back.
Thank you. It's been a few years. No questions?
No.
Cool. Thanks. Thanks for everything you do, guys.
Thank you. Which brings us to adjournment. We have a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned.